There's no nice way to say this, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Australia is run by B-grade people, the B team. Plato got it right when he said that the price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. But actually, it's something that was said by Confucius that I think should be keeping Australians awake at night. Confucius said, "Never give a sword to a man who cannot dance." It's a metaphor, of course, both for combat but also for power. Wielding power requires a certain amount of grace, perception, and quick-wittedness, which is similarly required in the social settings of the great social dances, which were a feature of cultures both Eastern and Western throughout history. The world today is changing, rearranging, to a degree not seen since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union in 1989 and 91, respectively. And moments of great change require great leadership. Statesmen who can achieve great things whilst treading lightly and speaking softly. Moments of great upheaval, like what we are in right now, require and reward leaders who can dance. But here in Australia, we don't have that. What we have are ideologues, arrogant, loud, and lead-footed. They are pissing off our allies in the US, sucking up to the Chinese, who will only ever despise them, and rightly so, because the Chinese can clearly see them for being the spineless lightweights that they are. And at the same time, they're screwing over the Australian people for the sake of their own careers and their ideological satisfaction. In this video, I'm going to highlight a particular trio who are literally sabotaging Australia as we speak. Now, one member of this trio is elected, but he's actually the least troublesome of the three. It's the two of them who are not elected, who are at this very moment doing us the most harm. My name is Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. And in this video, I'll be helping you to understand why it feels like Australia isn't keeping up with the rest of the world as it adjusts in the age of Trump. Now, I am 100% viewer supported, and I really appreciate those of you who have supported my work by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And those of you who've bought my books, DVDs, and t-shirts from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. You are helping me to keep doing what I do, which is to help people like you to think free. Also, I've recently turned on super chats and stickers, etc. on YouTube, so if that's a way that you'd like to support me, then you can now do that too. All right, thanks in advance. This trio that are tripping over their own feet and embarrassing Australia on the world stage are three people that you've certainly heard of, but you may not know how they've been working together behind the scenes to become a toxic brew that is destroying our ability to work with or even to meet with our closest ally, the United States of America. Firstly, there's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Now, he's a socialist, he's an intellectual lightweight, and he is possessed of all of the charm of an overcooked oyster. Elected pretty much because he played the factional game within the Labor Party very well and then talked incessantly about his mum and the commission house that he grew up in. But like I said in the intro, Albanese is actually the least of our worries in this trio. I mention him because he's technically the most senior and also because he's the one who could fix this if he wanted to. Second of the trio is US Ambassador Kevin Rudd. Now, he's a former Australian Prime Minister and someone who I said from the beginning of his time as a Prime Minister that he only viewed being the Australian Prime Minister as a stepping stone for his much more global ambitions. And right on cue, he is now making a career in unelected global roles. And finally, there is the E-Safety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant. Again, unelected, again, trying to play on the global stage and use Australia as a test case, a stepping stone. Because in my opinion, Julie Inman-Grant has ambitions for a global censorship role in the near future. What's interesting to me about this trio is that had Kamala Harris been elected president of the US, they would have been a match made in heaven. Australia would have been welcomed into the White House with open arms, and they would have all danced down the road to hell arm in arm. But in the age of President Trump 2.0, things work a little differently. See, Trump values competence, not just ideological alignment. And given that the Australian B team, this trio, are both ideologically a mismatch for Trump and also grossly incompetent, is it any wonder that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese can't even get a phone call with President Trump? Just recently, a senior US pollster, someone who supported all three of Donald Trump's presidential campaigns, has come out and said on Sky News what I've been saying for months. Donald Trump can't stand Kevin Rudd, and with good reason, and Rudd should be removed as US ambassador immediately. But Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, although he could do that if he wanted to, he doesn't know how to dance. He doesn't understand the social airs and graces and the personality aspects of global diplomacy. And that just because you like your ambassador to another country, if they don't like him, he's not going to be effective in that role. This has real-world consequences. Australia has tried and failed to get any sort of concessions during Trump's tariff diplomacy, for example. Now, I'll jump in and remind you of what I've said before, that I personally believe the free trade issue is actually more attached to the issue of free speech, and therefore to what Julie Inman-Grant, the E-Safety Commissioner, is doing. More on that in a minute. So I'll admit that it's not a given that a different ambassador could have gotten, well, any sorts of concessions on tariffs either. But a better ambassador would not have left Prime Minister Anthony Albanese red-faced, coming off that call with President Trump in February, claiming that the US were considering sparing Australia from the tariffs that they were slapping on everyone else, only to be proven wrong mere hours later. That is a diplomatic slap in the face that Kevin Rudd should have ensured never happened to our Prime Minister. And that event should have called into question Rudd's ability to deliver as an ambassador to a president that Rudd has described in the past as a village idiot, a traitor to the West, and, as if Kevin Rudd is the arbiter of such things, and as the most destructive president in history. And to be fair, Rudd is an expert on being destructive, I'll give him that. But if that weren't enough to convince Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to pick a new ambassador, maybe, pick someone who hasn't talked smack about Trump, then he should have been convinced by the rapid unravelling of the AUKUS deal. That's the defence deal with Australia, the UK and the US, collaborating on the development of new nuclear submarines. Now, these are due to be delivered around about the time that my toddler becomes eligible to vote. And it must be said that Trump isn't exactly happy with the UK either, and rightly so. Keir Starmer is just as out of his depth as Anthony Albanese is. So, just as with the tariff issue, with the AUKUS deal, I'm not saying that things would have gone better had Rudd not been the ambassador, but I am saying that the difficulty that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is having even scheduling a phone call with the US president wouldn't be such a problem if our ambassador was someone that President Trump actually liked. An ambassador is supposed to open doors, not close them, and is supposed to make your diplomatic efforts more successful, not less. And when you have a prime minister that is as statesmanlike as a mouldy mop, it becomes doubly important that your ambassador to your top defense ally knows how to dance. Having an ambassador with two left feet would be bad enough, but it's made even worse by the fact that in the world of Trump, freedom of speech is a not negotiable. And for reasons known only to Malcolm Turnbull and Satan himself, but I repeat myself, the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, the best Liberal Party Prime Minister that the Labor Party ever had, saw fit to create the role of the E-Safety Commissioner in 2017 and appoint Julie Inman-Grant into that role. Now, you'll be shocked to learn, shocked I tell you, that Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull are pretty chummy with each other these days, having joined forces on multiple occasions, most notably in a campaign against News Corp, with Malcolm Turnbull, the person who created the position of the E-Safety Commissioner and appointed Julie Inman-Grant to that role, publicly supporting and signing Kevin Rudd's petition for a royal commission into News Corp. You see how this works? They've created this atmosphere of suspicion around news and information and disinformation, and they use that to justify the powers that they then give to the E-Safety Commissioner. Notably, their scaremongering was on the topic of foreign interference, which is kind of funny because that's exactly what Julie Inman-Grant is now accused of by the US House Judiciary Committee for participating in the Global Alliance for Responsible Media and their financial pressure campaign to boycott advertising on platforms that allowed people to speak freely, platforms such as X. She's been named just 3 days ago by the House Judiciary Committee as an accomplice to GARM's efforts to, quote, silence American speech. So the current ambassador to the United States of America isn't just an unlikable prick who has said some very undiplomatic things about the US president. He's also had now a direct hand in the stifling of free speech in Australia and the empowering of the E-Safety Commissioner, Julie Inman Grant, and her efforts to try and stifle free speech in the US. And again, if Kamala Harris had been elected, this would have all gone brilliantly for all of them. Rudd would be dining in the White House every other weekend, and Inman Grant would be probably on her way to the UN to take up a role as the head of global e-safety or some similar nonsense. But this world is not that world. In Trump's world, the UN is suffering funding cuts, direct and indirect, and censorship is being called out, opposed, and now investigated instead of being celebrated. I've covered this topic extensively in the past, and I maintain my position that no one is going to get a truly free trade deal with the US unless they first give their people free speech. Now, I'll put the link to that video in the description of this video. But the bottom line is this: Australia is led by people who cannot dance. And as a result, we are missing out on all of the dances. No one wants to dance with us. We can't even get a phone call with the US president to discuss the biggest defense deal in our nation's history right now, because of the combination of an incompetent prime minister, a completely undiplomatic ambassador to the United States, and because we have a government-funded censorship program which seeks to censor not only Australians, but Americans as well. No wonder. Australia is being run by the B team. People who were given delusions of grandeur. They were told when they were kids, you can do anything, and they were dumb enough to believe it. Actually, to call them the B team is being a little too nice, because their scorecard at the moment is straight Fs. The economy's tanking, our allies won't talk to us, our rivals are taking advantage of us, our quality of life is falling away rapidly, and our defence force, it's in such a shambles that if the emus decided to restart the emu wars, we would be overrun in minutes. Australia is not a serious country right now because we're not run by serious people. Sadly, it's going to be a few years before Australian voters have the chance to make a change, and it remains to be seen when that time comes whether the alternatives we're offered are actually any better anyway. But in the meantime, we need to see Anthony Albanese replace the US ambassador Kevin Rudd with someone who is capable of being diplomatic, and remove Julie Inman Grant from her now untenable position as the E-Safety Commissioner, or even better, to just abolish the office of the E-Safety Commissioner altogether. But if he thinks that he's going to get a warm reception anywhere in America whilst keeping Julie Inman Grant, the woman who is now named in the House Judiciary Committee report as the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia, trying to censor Australians and Americans, you're dreaming. The world is changing fast. And our B team means that we are being left behind. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to see the world more clearly, to cut through the crap, to see through the smokescreen of the misinformation industrial complex, also known as the mainstream media, and to actually make sense of the nonsense that surrounds us. If this video has made sense to you, then please buy me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net and check out my books and DVDs and merch from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and as always, think free.